Now this diagram which we have seen before, the web layer or the web artifacts like JSF, JSP, servlets are stored in a WAR file. WAR stands for Web Archive. So let's create a web application. So let's go to our IDE and new project. We'll select Maven. We could have selected this and selected web application, but we are using Maven. We used Maven for EJB, so let's use Maven for web application too. Web application, next. So let's name it Animal Web because a project is related to a zoo. Then let's select the server as Glassfish 3 and Java EE 6. Finish. So first of all, since we are going to use JSF, we don't need any JSP files. So let's delete this. Delete, yes. Now that we have seen different scopes, let's create objects in those scopes. So right click, new and other. I go to Java Server Faces, then I select JSF Managed Bean. Next, and let's name this my request bean. And the scope is request. So here are the scopes. This we haven't studied, we'll see them later on, but these are the main scopes: request, session and application. And then finish. Now let's understand these annotations. Now request scope means this object belongs to the request scope and the objects will be created for different requests. Each single request from same client or different client will have different objects of this class. For each request from same or different client, new instances of this class are created because this is marked as request scoped. Now managed bean means that the class is managed by the runtime. So you do not use the new keyword for creating instances of this class. Now let's create an object for the session scope. New JSF managed bean and let's name it session bean. And let's change the scope to session. Finish. So the only difference is this is marked as session scoped. So a new instance of this bean gets created for each new client. Each client will have a different instance of this class. Now let's understand what has happened in our web.xml file. This is the main web configuration file, web.xml. So you can see there are 4 basic things mentioned over here: one context param, one servlet, the mapping for this servlet, and a session config. So let me change this a bit. So the main thing in this configuration file is this servlet and the mapping for the servlet. This servlet is named as faces servlet and the mapping also has the same servlet name. That's why this mapping belongs to this servlet. So whenever a request comes for this .xhtml file, this servlet will be handling that request, and this servlet is nothing but the JSF servlet. Now load on startup means this servlet is loaded when the application is deployed. Now all pages or all the page requests for .xhtml files are handled by a JSF runtime, or basically the faces servlet. So even if we have JSP files or servlets, only files or only pages ending with this extension are going to be handled by JSF. This context param of development gives a better error reporting. We'll see this feature later on. So before we move ahead, let's understand the structure of a web application. So first of all, let me just create a sample page, new, other, and JSF page. Let's just create a sample page. Let the name be as it is. And let me put a dependency on some jar file. So add dependency. Let's put a dependency on MySQL connector. Okay. Now right click and clean and build the application. So if you go to the file tab, under the target, here is the WAR file generated for us when we build the application. So let's see the structure of this WAR file. Your application under the root directory will contain all the JSF and JSP pages. That is if you are using JSP. Under the root folder, there is a folder named webinf. Under it, we have classes and lib folder. Classes will contain all your managed bean, like whatever beans were created till now. And if you're using servlets, all the servlets will be placed over here. If you're depending on any jar file, like we depended on MySQL, that will be placed over here. And under the web-inf, directly under web-inf, we have web.xml, which is the main web configuration file. And faces config.xml is the JSF configuration file. So let's now see the structure of our application. We, if you know, have placed a dependency on MySQL and just created a sample JSF file. So this is that WAH file. So let's open it. And here's our JSF page directly under the root directory. And web-inf consists of classes and lib folder and your web configuration file. The lib folder contains your connector, that is your jar files, and classes folder contains your managed beans, which we have created till now under their respective packages. So basically, when we run this application, this is the file which gets deployed on your Glassfish server. Let's move on and create the third type of bean, that is application scoped bean. Let's name it my app, okay, and change the scope to application. Finish. So the bean has an annotation of application scoped, which means it lasts from when the application is deployed to when the application is undeployed. There is just a single instance of this bean per application. So our request scoped bean are created as each request are fired to the server. Session beans are created for each single client. So if there are two clients or two browsers requesting, then you have two instances of this bean. And application scoped bean, there is just a single instance per server. Now let's start creating our JSF pages. So right click on web pages, new, other, Java server faces, and JSF page. Next, let's name it something like index. And select facelets option over here. Finish. So let me add some faces component, JSF components, and later on I'll speak about them. So over here, select form. I'm basically creating a form for adding an animal. So let's animal type and H input text. Let's give it an ID of animal type and let's close this off. Then animal total number and input text, and let's give it an ID of total, or maybe animal total. Okay, let's close this, and let's now create a button for submitting this form. So H command button, and let's give it an ID of submit button, and let's create a value of submit. Okay, now let's just save this form first. Let me just give it a heading of page. Okay, so let's add a BR tag and over here too. So basically a JSF page is nothing but an XHTML page with some JSF tags in it. For example, this is one of your JSF tags, and over here, and this is another JSF tag, then this is also a JSF tag, and this is also a JSF tag. So all the tags which we have used from this namespace and which we have used a prefix of H belong to the JSF namespace. Now before we run this page, let me do a simple setting. So I open web.xml file, I go to the pages section, and for welcome files I select index.xhtml. First save it, and if you go to the source section, so basically this gets written. What this says is this is the welcome file. So when you access the website and you do not specify any page, then this is the default page which will be shown. So let's right click this application and run. And here's the output. If you see the URL, there is no index.xhtml mentioned over here because we have mentioned that as a welcome file over here. Because of that, whenever the server fetches just the root directory, what we get is the index.html file. So just to show you what we actually got from the server, let's view the page source. So our head tag over here and body tag over here are converted into a head section and body section. Our input type is equal to text, or input text tag got converted into input type is equal to text tag, which is an HTML tag. Okay, and the command button got rendered as input type is equal to submit. So you may be thinking that why to use these tags? Why can't you just use HTML tags? What's the benefit of using this JSF tags? So let's consider an immediate benefit. So in your source directory, let's first delete all this beans we have created in the past. Delete, and let's create a new bean. JSF managed bean. Let's name it animal bean, and let the scope be request finish. Now let's create two fields in this bean. So delete this. So these are the two fields, type and total number. And let me create getters and setters for these fields. Insert code, getters and setters, and select both of them. Now in the page for the input text tags, let's add a value attribute. Value is equal to, and we'll select animal bean dot type. Okay, and for this value is equal to hash curly braces animal bean dot total number. So what we just did is we bound the value attributes of the input text tags to the bean over here and here. What this means is when the page gets submitted, when you click this button, the values for these two text fields will be entered over here. First of all, a new instance of this bean will get created because this is request scope, and these two fields will get populated from the values from these fields. So let's run the application. Run. And here's the page. So if I enter something over here, say a dog and total number 5, and submit, what is going to happen is an instance of this bin gets created because this is request scope. For each request, a new instance gets created, and because it's value bound, the values are entered over here. So in this page we haven't used these values, so basically the values are wasted as of now. So let's use these values.